You're tuned in to Beyond the Known. Today, we're exploring something truly fascinating. Four individuals, enigmatic figures, really, whose arrival in ancient Oahu left a mark that, well, it still resonates today.
We're talking about a history filled with immense knowledge, a kind of profound spiritual balance, and claims of almost miraculous healing power.
Exactly. These figures are connected to what are now known as the healer stones of Kapaemahu.
The tradition names them Kapaemahu, Kahaloa, Kapuni, and Kanohi. They were travelers.
Travelers who came a long way, right? From Waikīkī.
That's the ancient name for Tahiti, yes. They arrived in the Waikīkī area of Oahu, and this was a very long time ago, predating King Kakihihewa's rule.
It's a deep history. And the accounts, they don't just paint them as, skilled people.
No, far from it. They were seen as operating on a completely different level, famous across the islands, apparently, for their wisdom, their healing arts, even prophecy.
They sound exceptional, almost more than human.
That's certainly how the traditions frame them. Celestial, perhaps, possessing abilities that seemed, well, extraordinary for the time.
And this is where it gets even more mysterious, isn't it? Their identity.
Yes. The healers were identified as mahu,
which is a traditional gender identity in Hawaiian and Tahitian cultures, often described as fluid or embodying both male and female aspects.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And importantly, this wasn't just a footnote about them. It was traditionally understood as being fundamental to their power.
Like the source of their abilities, this balance.
Exactly. A profound balance, spiritual and physical, that allowed them to perhaps tap into healing energies or knowledge beyond the ordinary.
It makes you wonder, was their wisdom simply too advanced for that era?
That's the implication, isn't it? If their healing seemed miraculous, their knowledge beyond the curve. It invites some pretty radical thinking.
Were they maybe visitors from some unknown advanced civilization, bringing knowledge that just looked like magic back then?
Or, as some more fringe theories might suggest, time travelers. Using physics we barely understand now to appear in ancient Oahu.
It's fascinating speculation because their story arc is so distinct. They arrive, they share this incredible knowledge and healing manna, this spiritual power, and then they leave.
They return to their homeland, yeah. It really frames their visit as something special, an extraordinary intervention almost. Maybe something not entirely human.
And their final act before leaving is the key to the physical mystery today.
The transference of power. The tradition says they imbued their spiritual force, their mana, into 4 massive basalt stones.
Anchoring their healing power right there, in the land, a power that some say is still present.
Which leads us to the core puzzle for this episode. How did this incredible story, especially the part about their mahu identity, get almost wiped from the public record? And how did it manage to survive and be reclaimed?
But if we're going to unravel this mystery, we have to begin with the tangible 4 stones that still rest in Waikīkī today. Let's start there.
Okay, the stones themselves. The monument is known as Na Puchaku'ola a Kapaemahu a Kapuni. And seeing them today is, well, it's quite something.
Because of where they are.
Partly, yes. You have these 4 enormous basalt stones sitting right there on Kuhi Beach in Waikīkī. They're on a platform, enclosed by an iron gate now.
And they really are huge, aren't they? Not just little markers.
Oh, no. They're massive. The largest one is estimated around 8 tons. Think about that. 8 tons.
Wow.
And the others are substantial too, maybe 1, 2, and 3 tons each. They command the space.
And this space is, well, it's about as busy as it gets.
Exactly. It's this bustling, almost chaotic corner of the Waikīkī boardwalk. You've got the Sheraton Moana Surf Raider nearby, the Kapahulu Groin Walkway.
Yeah.
Tourists, shops, everything.
So these ancient sacred stones are literally sitting in the heart of modern commercial Waikīkī.
Hidden in plain sight, you could say, a profound piece of history surrounded by the epitome of Pacific tourism development.
How did they even survive there? It seems incredible they weren't just moved or destroyed decades ago.
Their survival is a story in itself. Originally, they were on beachfront property owned by a man named Archibald Scott Cleghorn.
He wasn't native Hawaiian, was he? Scottish-born.
That's right. A prominent businessman, but deeply connected to Hawaii. He was actually the father of Princess Kalilani.
Okay, so he had significant ties.
He did, and though he wasn't Hawaiian, he became, perhaps unintentionally, their protector.
How so?
Through his will. When Cleghorn died in 1910, he put a specific clause in his will about the historical stones on his property.
What did it say?
It directed that they shall not be defaced or removed from said premises. Pretty explicit.
Don't touch them. Leave them where they are.
Essentially, yes. And that legal instruction, tucked away in his will, proved absolutely critical decades later.
Right, when development really took off in Waikīkī.
Exactly. Fast forward to 1941, the property was changing, the old rental buildings were out, and plans were in place for a big commercial project. The Waikīkī bowling lanes, later called Waikīkī Bowl.
A bowling alley. Right on top of, or next to, these secret stones.
Pretty much. And obviously, 4 massive stones, including an 8-tonner, are a bit of an obstacle for construction. The developers naturally wanted them gone.
But they couldn't move them. Because of the will.
That's the amazing part. Cleghorn's directive was legally binding. They couldn't deface them, couldn't remove them. It made relocation impossible.
So what did they do? Build around them.
Or, in some accounts, literally over them. It seems the stones were buried under sand, maybe some construction fill. For a time, they essentially vanished from public view.
Forgotten.
To some extent, yeah. Or maybe just remembered locally, sometimes simplified down to the wizard stones of Kapaemahu, which, kind of strips away the deeper meaning.
And this happened more than once, this cycle of being lost and found.
It seems so. There were periods of rediscovery and restoration attempts noted in 1963, 1980, and then a more significant effort in 1997.
It's remarkable. A legal clause from a Scottish businessman in 1910 ends up preserving this ancient indigenous site against a century of intense American development pressure.
It's one of those strange twists of history that helped keep something invaluable physically present, even when its story was being obscured.
Now that we know what the stones are, it's time to uncover the traditional stories tied to them. Stories that tell us who placed them there and why.
Right. Let's delve into the mu'ulelo, the oral tradition. This is really the heart of the matter.
And it starts with the names again.
Yes, it clearly identifies the 4 healers, Kapaemahu, Kahaloa, Kapuni, and Kinohi. And it confirms their origin from Kahiki, the South Pacific, Tahiti.
Settling in Uluku, which is ancient Waikīkī, before the time of the well-known chiefs.
Exactly. Long before the reign of Kakuhihewa. And the tradition emphasizes their status upon arrival. They weren't apprentices, they were masters.
Masters of what specifically? Healing?
Healing arts were central, yes, but also profound wisdom and even prophetic abilities. Their very presence was seen as a blessing, a gift to the people there.
And their departure wasn't just a quiet exit.
No, it was marked by this incredibly significant act. The oral accounts describe how, before they returned across the ocean, they gathered the community.
And performed this transference.
Yes. They consciously transferred their spiritual power, their mana, into these 4 large basalt stones. That's what transformed them into Napuhaku Ola, the stones of life, or the healing stones.
Ensuring their gifts remained even after they were gone. A permanent legacy.
A permanent connection to that healing power, anchored in the physical landscape.
Are there details about where exactly they placed them?
There are. Some accounts get quite specific, suggesting ritually important placements. 2 stones, Kapaemahu and Kinohi, were said to be placed near where the healers lived in Uluku.
Okay. And the other 2?
Placed specifically in the shallows of the Apahau stream.
A stream? Why there?
Well, the Apakawa stream was a vital source of fresh water in Waikīkī back then. Placing the stones there connects their healing mana directly to the life-giving water, to the essential elements of the land and the nearby sea. It's very symbolic.
It grounds the story geographically. Now we absolutely have to talk more about the Mahu identity.
Yes, it's impossible to understand the story fully without understanding Mahu. It's a traditional identity found in Hawaii and Tahiti, referring to individuals who embody both masculine and feminine spirit or essence. Gender fluid is a common way to describe it today.
And it's not just a local thing, is it? It's part of a wider Pacifica understanding of gender.
That's a crucial point. We often see it discussed within the context of Pacifica SGM identities, sexual and gender minorities. There's an acronym used sometimes, MVPFAFF plus SHE, to encompass related identities.
Like Fefafine in Samoa.
Exactly. In Fakaladian, Tonga, Akavaline in the Cook Islands, and others. The acronym highlights that these aren't isolated ideas, but part of a spectrum across the Pacific.
And these aren't just about gender in the Western sense, right? They're more complex.
Much more complex. They're deeply rooted in connections to family, community, ancestors, culture. These roles often carried respect, responsibility, and sometimes, like in this case, were associated with special spiritual capabilities.
Which brings us back to the healers. The tradition explicitly links their Mahu identity to their power.
Correct. It wasn't incidental. It was seen as fundamental. The balance they embodied, the integration of male and female energies, was believed to be the very source of their miraculous healing abilities. It allowed them to channel or wield mana effectively.
It gives their story such depth, which makes the later erasure even more, well, upsetting.
Deeply tragic, yes. That this central, respected aspect of their identity was systematically removed from the public narrative.
Particularly during colonial times.
Colonial influence certainly played a huge role in suppressing indigenous understandings of gender and spirituality that didn't fit Western norms. But the erasure continued much later.
You mentioned the 1997 restoration effort.
Yes. When the site was restored then, a new plaque was installed, and that plaque deliberately omitted any mention of the healers being mahu. It completely erased that crucial part of the story.
Why then? In 1997?
Well, you have to remember the context of the 1980s and 90s. It was a period of intense social and political backlash against LGBTQ plus people globally.
The HIV/AIDS crisis, debates over same-sex marriage.
Precisely. There was significant animosity and fear directed towards gay people and anyone challenging traditional gender norms. In that climate, an indigenous history celebrating gender fluidity, especially one tied to respected figures, was likely seen as problematic or controversial by those controlling the narrative. Easier to just sanitize it, omit it.
So the erasure wasn't just an old colonial hangover. It was an active choice made relatively recently, reflecting contemporary prejudices.
It appears so, which makes the modern journey of reclaiming that history even more significant.
Tell us about that reclamation effort.
It's been driven primarily by Kanaka Maoli native Hawaiian caretakers, cultural practitioners, historians, and importantly, members of the mahu community itself. They fought for decades to bring the full, unedited story back into the light.
And they succeeded.
Yes, thankfully. After years of advocacy and education, a major milestone was reached in October 2023.
What happened then?
New interpretive signage was finally installed at the Kapaemahu site, and this new signage explicitly includes and honors the healers' mahu identity as integral to their story and their power.
That's huge. After decades of omission.
It's a landmark victory for historical accuracy and cultural resilience. It publicly acknowledges the truth that was preserved in oral tradition, even when official narratives tried to erase it.
Legends like these are powerful, but they also open the door to speculation. Could there be more to these healers than history tells us? Some believe so.
Well, when you talk about four individuals consciously transferring immense spiritual power or mana into massive stones, pushaku, you inevitably step into the realm of, well, less conventional ideas.
Like subtle energy theories, sacred geometry.
Exactly. People start drawing parallels with other ancient monumental structures like pyramids and the theories surrounding them.
The idea that these structures aren't just passive stone, but might interact with energy fields. Cosmic energy, bioenergy, that sort of thing.
Right. The speculation is that the sheer mass, the specific material basalt in this case, and maybe even their precise placement and alignment, could create a kind of spiritual technology. A capacitor for mana, perhaps.
Some research, though definitely on the fringe, talks about psychotronic generators. What does it mean?
Psychotronics is a field often considered pseudoscience by the mainstream that investigates interactions between consciousness, energy fields, and physical matter. The idea behind a psychotronic generator is that certain geometric forms, especially large ones aligned with Earth's geomagnetic field, might collect or structure ambient energy.
And this energy could have tangible effects.
Proponents claim it does. They cite anecdotal reports or sometimes specific experiments suggesting effects like rapid food preservation inside pyramid shapes, restoring the sharpness of razor blades, accelerating biological healing processes.
And enhanced plant growth, too. That's often mentioned.
Yes, increased biomass, longer stems, things that suggest some kind of beneficial energy field influencing living systems. These reported effects often mirror the kinds of miraculous outcomes associated with places like the Kapaemahu stones.
So it provides a potential, albeit an unconventional, mechanism for the healing reputation.
It does, and then consciousness gets layered on top of that.
Meaning the stones might be powerful, but maybe belief or intention unlocks it.
That's a key idea in some of this research. There was one controlled study looking at plant growth under pyramid structures. They tested the pyramid alone, healer intention alone, and then both combined.
And the combination was strongest.
Significantly so, according to that study. The plants showed a greater increase in dry weight when exposed to both the structure and the focused intent compared to either factor individually. It suggests a synergistic effect.
Applying that here, the healers infused into the stones might not just be a static battery. It could be an energy matrix that responds to belief, to ritual, to the intention of the person seeking healing.
It could offer a framework for understanding why these stones maintain such a powerful reputation for healing over centuries, operating perhaps through mechanisms that conventional science doesn't yet fully grasp or accept.
But the speculation goes even further than subtle energy, doesn't it? Given how advanced and mysterious the healer seemed.
It does. The narrative of their origins arriving from a distant land, possessing wisdom beyond their time, inevitably fuels theories about non-earthly origins.
Ancient astronauts, that whole line of thinking.
That's one avenue. Or a related idea, that maybe these advanced visitors weren't aliens from another planet, but time travelers from our own future.
Is time travel even theoretically possible?
Well, traveling to the future is allowed by Einstein's relativity. If you could travel near the speed of light, time would pass slower for you than for Earth, so you'd return to a future point.
But coming back to the past.
That's much trickier, theoretically. It requires concepts like wormholes, shortcuts through space-time, sometimes called Einstein-Rosen bridges. These were first proposed theoretically way back in 1935. They remain purely hypothetical, but they offer a potential mechanism for rapid transit across vast distances in space and time.
So if a future humanity mastered that kind of physics,
right,
why would they come back here to ancient Oahu?
The speculation runs wild here, maybe to correct something in the past, to guide early civilizations. Perhaps after some future cataclysm forced them to revisit history.
Some of these theories get quite specific, linking to myths.
Yes, sometimes you see attempts to connect these ideas to global myths, like legends of ant people emerging from underground, perhaps suggesting future humans adapted to subterranean life after a surface disaster, maybe even evolving non-human traits.
It sounds pretty far out there.
It is definitely deep in speculative territory. But the connection people try to make is this. If the Kapaemahu healers had knowledge that seemed futuristic, and if their mahu identity represented a unique balance, sometimes interpreted as transcending typical gender.
Could that identity somehow be viewed through a non-human lens, or a future human evolutionary lens? Were they envoys from a different kind of humanity?
It's the ultimate fringe question stemming from the core mystery. Who or what were these incredibly powerful, wise, and balanced beings who visited ancient Hawaii?
At first, it might seem like the only explanation is something extraordinary. But this is beyond the known, and this is the part where we step back and let science and grounded reason offer their side of the story.
And grounding this really means returning to the richness of Hawaiian history and culture itself, which honestly provides a very complete and powerful explanation without needing aliens or time travel.
You mean the practice of using stones, pushaku, as memorials?
Exactly. It's a deeply ingrained cultural practice across Hawaii. Stones aren't just markers. They're integral parts of Wahipana, celebrated, sacred, or storied places. Yeah. They function as living archives. They hold history, genealogy, epistemology.
So commemorating powerful healers by infusing mana into stones fits perfectly within that established cultural framework.
Perfectly. And understanding the mu'ulelo, the oral tradition, is paramount here. That's the primary research, the authentic account. We have to be careful to distinguish it from later editions or distortions.
Like those early 20th century publications that tried to frame it in Western terms.
Precisely. You mentioned that 1907 text. It starts by comparing the healers to Greek and Roman figures, immediately imposing a foreign framework. And then it adds details, like a supposed sacrifice of a virgin female.
Which scholars now think was just made up or added later.
The consensus among many cultural experts is that these elements are likely European interpolations, maybe playing into colonial tropes about primitive rituals or the exotic savage. They weren't part of the original Hawaiian narrative, which focused on the gift of healing, the journey, and the spiritual power of the mahu travelers.
It highlights how important it is to listen to the indigenous voice first and foremost.
Absolutely. And understanding the political context of the erasure of the mahu identity is also crucial.
We touched on the colonial suppression and the later backlash in the 80s and 90s.
Right. Colonial governance often actively undermined indigenous social structures, including respected roles like mahu, because they didn't align with Western patriarchal or binary gender norms. And that historical bias was unfortunately reinforced or perhaps reactivated during those later periods of social panic around LGBTQ+ rights.
So the omission on the 1997 plaque wasn't just ignorance. It was arguably part of that ongoing logic of elimination, as some scholars call it, trying to erase identities that don't fit the dominant mold.
That's a strong interpretation, yes. It reflects a pattern of assimilation or erasure targeting indigenous ways of being.
But the story did survive, which speaks volumes about cultural resilience.
It really does. The effort to recover and retell the full story is a vital part of the broader Hawaiian cultural renaissance, this ongoing movement to revitalize language, practices, and indigenous knowledge systems.
Challenging those historical attempts at erasure.
Exactly, and asserting the value of Native Hawaiian identity and history on its own terms.
People like George Kanehaley and Papa Henry Awe, who led the 1997 restoration, were part of this.
Yes, figures like them were crucial. They worked to ensure that Hawaiian cultural values, like malama care and stewardship, were central to how the site was treated, even within the heavily commercialized environment of Waikīkī.
And the recent installation of the accurate signage in 2023 is the latest chapter in that story of reclamation.
It is a direct result of decades of dedicated work by community leaders, cultural practitioners, and the mahu community demanding that their history be told truthfully and respectfully.
Are there legal protections now for sites like this?
Yes, thankfully. Hawaii state law now mandates that development projects consider the impact on historic properties. And that explicitly includes traditional cultural properties, places significant because of long-standing culture practices or beliefs.
So the stones themselves are protected, but also the ability of people to engage with them traditionally.
That's the intent. The law aims to protect not just the physical site, but also customary practices, ensuring that Native Hawaiians can continue to access sacred sites and perform rituals, acknowledging the deep historical and spiritual connections.
And finally, the story itself reinforces connections beyond Hawaii, doesn't it? Back to Tahiti.
Absolutely. The fact that the healers came from Kahiki underscores the ancient and extensive voyaging networks and cultural kinship that connected islands across the Pacific long before European contact. Colonization often tried to sever or ignore these inter-island relationships.
So the story is also a reminder of a larger, interconnected Pacifico world.
It is. And when you see Kanaka Maoli, or visitors from Tahiti, Mahu people, engaging with the stones today, perhaps leaving lei, offering chants or prayers, it's more than just tourism.
It's a living connection to that history.
It's a performance of history, in a way, keeping the ancestral memory alive, reaffirming those ancient bonds right there on Waikīkī Beach. It connects the past to the present through continued spiritual practice and recognition.
So when we look at the Kapaemahu stones, we're seeing layers upon layers. There's the physical reality of these massive ancient stones.
Immovable, practically speaking, and legally protected by that century-old will, they've physically anchored this story in place.
Then there's the traditional mu'olelo, the powerful story of the four mahu healers and their gift of mana.
A story preserved through oral tradition despite immense pressure.
And then there's the history of erasure and reclamation. Decades of being buried, ignored, misrepresented.
Right. Buried under a bowling alley, literally. Plaques that omitted the most crucial part of their identity. Narratives framed through a Western, sometimes exoticizing lens.
Yet the core truth persisted, thanks to the commitment of Hawaiian cultural leaders, practitioners, and the mahu community itself.
They ensured the full story, the powerful, healing narrative, eventually returned to public view in its proper context.
It really is an incredible story of resilience. The enduring history of the Kapaemahu stones serves as, well, a powerful testament, doesn't it?
It truly does. It shows that even in a place as intensely developed and commercialized as Waikīkī, cultural memory, spiritual significance, that mana, it can't ultimately be bulldozed or erased.
As long as people keep remembering, as long as they keep honoring the truth.
That act of remembering, of retelling, of honoring, that's what keeps the connection alive.
That's it for this journey beyond the known. If the unknown calls to you, do not forget to like, subscribe, and follow. There is so much more waiting to be discovered. And if you really want to help us out, consider becoming a member. With Secret Passage, you will unlock early access to our episodes, our audiobook library, Audiobook Underground, and a rotating list of curated wonders, other videos we recommend for curious minds. For those who want it all, Vault Access gives you everything, plus a board seat where you can request topics for us to explore in future episodes. Your support keeps the adventure alive.